Oh,
car to here.
okay.
We're on skateboards, so half and half.
All right.
Okay, you on, Gary? Okay. Okay, so what do you want to do? You go ahead.
Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. We just want to make a brief announcement about Brad Lancaster and how far the three of us are up here together, because this is actually where Brad first spoke in Santa Barbara 10 years ago. And Santa Barbara Permaculture Network did his first book tour. Is that right? Correct?
Second book tour.
And his second book tour. But we met Brad in, it goes back so far, our history with Brad, and we just wanted to express our fondness for Brad. And Wes and I first met him at a Build Here Now. It's a natural building colloquium that takes place at the Lama Foundation in New Mexico. And at that point, that was actually the first moment we'd heard about rainwater harvesting. We were there with all these incredible natural builders, and then we went down to this little room, and there was Brad, and he's in his missionary zeal, and he captured our hearts. And so, and then as he began to sort of formulate his ideas about it and the thought that he was going to do a book tour, that's when we said we have to, you know, and Wes is a master organizer of book tours, and that's how that all started. But we just wanted to say that this is sort of an anniversary for us and how much we love and care Brad.
So hi everyone, I'm Barbara Wishingrad. I'm with the Sweetwater Collaborative, and we're the co-sponsors of this event. And I just wanted to encourage you to find out more about Sweetwater. We're a local collaborative that is dedicated to helping people live their environmental values by really changing the built environment in Santa Barbara and making it reflect what we really want to do and how we want to be resilient and move forward and be more sustainable. So we do community-based hands-on workshops helping people put sustainable systems like rainwater harvesting systems and gray water into their homes. And we have literature on that table back there, and we have a sign-up sheet. So, or you can always feel free to see me and ask me whatever you want or give me suggestions or comments. So thanks so much for coming.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got workshops coming up too.
Yeah, I thought you about your workshop.
Yeah, we have a workshop this Saturday. It's part one of Food Forest Workshop on the Mesa. And we have the second part. Well, anyway, we're going to be doing the rainwater harvesting basins on Saturday, and then we're going to be doing the planting and some rock work on July 13th. So
Yeah.
check our website and sign up, and you'll get updates.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. A lot of these things that happen in our community are sometimes sparked by speakers who come through. And Brad's been a good inspiration for the work Barbara's done by just constantly feeding into our community the energy for the community to take these ideas that Brad developed in Tucson and start implementing them here in Santa Barbara. I think first, I lost my legs there. Okay, so not much left of my classes anyway.
We wanted to make a quick announcement about our upcoming events.
Right, so we have a real special speaker, Christopher Shine. He's written a book called The Vegetable Gardener's Guide to Permaculture, Creating an Edible Ecosystem. He is a teacher of permaculture at the Merritt College since 2005 and teaches their permaculture design course there and other courses. He's going to be here to help promote the fundraiser for the Santa Barbara City College Permaculture Garden. And this is a fundraiser for it, and it's on Indigo, and you can go on there and make a donation. He's here to help promote the building of the garden on the campus, and the money raised from it, they're going to try to raise $10,000 to build a garden in front of the culinary arts, and so that the cooks and the garden can actually meet. Novel idea, right?
And all proceeds from the evening's event goes towards that Indigo campaign. So
Yeah.
come out and tell your friends about it, and that's July 13th.
Yeah, it's Saturday, July 13th at 6:30. Thank you. We have one more event. We always have these amazing people sometimes floating through Santa Barbara. We have a series called Permaculture Around the World, which we've done since 2007. And these are the people that are doing amazing things in countries all over the world that happen to be in Santa Barbara or coming through Santa Barbara. And we're blessed to have Joseph, and I'll let you pronounce that name. What's it?
Letanayu, we're not sure, from
Yeah,
Kenya.
from Kenya. From Kenya. He's a Maasai, and he's doing amazing work there. He's right now at Quail Springs for their International Permaculture Design course. He's there teaching there, and then when he finishes, he's going to come here to Santa Barbara to kind of talk about his amazing work, transformative work in Kenya. And I think that's it, Margie. You can go away. Oh, we keep forgetting, don't we? It'll be, God, we're really good at this tonight, July 11th at 7 o'clock here at the Faulkner Gallery. Excuse me, thank you for covering all those things. Well, I would like to quickly introduce Brad. I think Margie's done a really beautiful job. And Brad, with his new book, his new edition, it really has... I love Brad because he looks at these books. I think when we first talked about the books, he said, "This is my retirement." So, everybody has a different way of, he thought that this book is something that he could keep growing and that would support him and also support the ideas and all the stuff that he's done in Tucson and the people he's interacted, and to push the whole rainwater harvesting to the next level, which we need to go. We really need to move there. So, Brad Lancaster, I'll turn it over to you. Good friend.
All right, so I just wanted to also thank Wes and Margie because they were instrumental too in this book actually happening, some of the early advice and all that they gave me in support, and for, as they mentioned, doing the book tours. I know water harvesting, I don't know book tours. And if it weren't for them, it would have been a real struggle to get the word out. Okay, so, and also Barbara too. It's been great working with her with a number of workshops and getting that info out to the community so it can grow. So tonight, I want to give a new talk, but if any of you have seen me speak before, you're going to see some things that you may have seen before, along with some new info. And as this is an evolving talk, if any of you want to give me some critical feedback afterwards, I would love it, because I want to enhance this talk. So I want to start by asking these questions. So what is the story of your place? Wherever you live, if that's Santa Barbara, what is the story of Santa Barbara? What's its essence? What makes it alive? And what's your relationship to that place? Because whatever your relationship to that place is, that determines your role in the story of that place. Because you and wherever you live are absolutely linked, and you determine each other's path. So as you think about what the story is of your place and your role is in that story, I want to share with you a story, not the story, of my place. So I'm from Tucson, Arizona, and these are two photos taken from the same vantage point. The one on the left in 1904 and the one on the right more recently. And you can see some dramatic changes that have happened. So Tucson, the area that is now called Tucson, is one of the oldest continuously inhabited places in what is now the continental United States. Okay? And that is because of its once more abundant resources. So we used to have a river that flowed year-round through town. Not only did we have that river flowing year-round, the water table is just 20 feet below the surface. We had abundant springs and artesian wells. We had an incredible riparian forest of mesquite, willow, and hackberry cottonwood trees, so dense that it would diffuse the falling force of the raindrops, and it would absorb the bulk of the rain that fell from the sky. and then all the wildlife that attracted and the other resources. It was a very verdant place. But now we have killed the river through the over-pumping of our groundwater at a rate that exceeds natural recharge. We have also crippled the watershed's ability to naturally recharge itself by replacing the sponge of the living vegetation with pavement of streets, buildings, and so on. And our water table has dropped over 300 feet, continues to drop at a rate of 4 feet per year in many parts of the basin. Not only have we killed the river, but also the springs and the artesian wells, and we've killed the forest, the sponge. So when we look more closely at what's going on, we see that basically we've made this conversion. We've shifted from a net or a sponge that keeps building on itself to a drain that rapidly reduces its carrying capacity. And looking within the city itself, you see that we're a hydrophobic society. We're afraid of water. And whether or not it's conscious, we're creating infrastructure that rapidly drains resources. So a typical parking lot, commercial development just washes that water right out. And then a housing development, the houses are on the high part, that's good, but we drain the water off the roof, past the landscape into the street, and the guns of Navarone shoot the water right out of the system. So we are rapidly depleting our most valuable, highest quality water, the rainwater, that's free. And not only are we doing that, but simultaneously we're creating the heat island effect. With all this exposed hardscape, we're increasing temperatures 10 degrees Fahrenheit in our community. And that's not global warming, it's just local warming caused by this excessive hardscape. It absorbs the heat of the sun during the day and radiates it out at night. And then that increases the rate at which we lose water to evaporation. So this dehydration infrastructure also works as dysentery infrastructure. So when we do get the rains, we get these spike flood flows that did not occur historically to the degree they now do. So floods that used to occur every 100 years are now occurring every 10 years because when it rains, the water is not infiltrated, but rather it shoots off at a unnaturally fast rate. So that's a liability for traffic, but it's also a boon for the new tourism industry around the extreme sport of urban runoff kayaking. And so there's positives and the negatives. My community of Tucson, we have chosen not to address the problem of our overconsumption of our local waters and mismanagement of them, and instead chosen to just continue on as though there was no problem. And we have decided to instead take water from elsewhere. So we are in the Colorado River watershed, but we are historically a contributor to the water of the Colorado. So we're Tucson's here, we drain to the Colorado through the Santa Cruz and the Gila River. But now we are taking from the river through the Central Arizona Water Project. So we've exploded our takings of the watershed to be the entire state of Arizona and many parts of many other states in the western U.S. So this is the canal. It cost $4 billion to construct. It costs $80 million a year to operate, the bulk of which goes to pay the electric bill to run these pumps, because we're over 300 feet above the river. And so we have to pump that water uphill. It's such a great height and distance that this canal is the single largest consumer of electricity in the entire state of Arizona and the single largest emitter of carbon in the entire state of Arizona because we burn coal at the Page power plant to generate the electricity to make all this work. And it's not just bad in that sense. And I want you guys to think, too, about the term distance is energy. Anytime we move anything, be it people, food, water, energy, it consumes energy. The greater the distance, the more it consumes. So what I'm really about is how can we maximize the local, okay? And how can we maximize the living systems of this planet, which make little go far to be a lot, simply by cycling myriad times, okay? It's a little more bad stuff before we get into the good stuff. So at the Colorado River Delta, this is a photo taken there, The flow of the river into the Sea of Cortez is just a fraction of what it once was. So we are contributing to the killing of the cultures of the people that live within that ecosystem and all the wildlife within. And I was recently in the Sea of Cortez doing some work, and it's incredible the migration of the sea life. We think of the birds migrating. Well, the amount of sea life that migrates is unbelievable. And it's so dependent on the nutrient flows through that fresh water for the shrimp and whatnot, and the small life that's the basis of the big life, like the whales and so on. But that is starting to crash. So looking at that depressing stuff, I look at that and I see this is a degenerative story. And much of how we're investing our resources in degenerative investments, these are things that start to break down as soon as they're made and we start to use them. And they require ongoing investments of energy and outside inputs to keep them going. And they definitely consume more resources than they produce, while degrading the health of their surroundings and of the planet. So when we look at this and we look at what's happening, I really get upset and depressed. And then I ask myself, is that the story of this place? Is that the story of Tucson? Is that its purpose and its calling? And since I'm a citizen of Tucson, is that my purpose and my calling to forward that story and what it's doing? I say no, okay? Because that's just too depressing. So what is my role? Well, we all have the ability to decide what our role is. And in trying to seek out what might be the best role for ourselves, I like to look around, what's happening. And so here's a little statistic that started to shift me on my path. So in Tucson, more rain falls on the surface area of Tucson in a typical year of rain, we just get 11 inches a year, than the entire community of Tucson consumes of utility water in a year. Okay? And it's the same in Santa Barbara. These are your statistics. So the average citizen of Santa Barbara uses about 128 gallons per person per day. But yet, if you were to look at the rain that falls on the surface area of Santa Barbara, divide that by the population, and then divide again by 365 days a year, it would be 183 gallons per person per day, if you could capture that water and spread it out over the year. And I'm not including the water coming off the mountains. I'm just including the boundary of your city. So I got these little statistics and then placed them on a little tool I've been using. It's called a one-page place assessment. It's like a Cliff Notes page that's telling you info about your climate, the sun, the wind, water, water G, the water energy connection, and totem species. And I'll cover a number of these. But if you want to get this, go to this page of my website, and I also give you a how-to guide on how to create your own. So let's now shift away from the degenerative path to a generative path. Okay, and this is an example taking that. So what is something that's generative? Well, just like the degenerative path or investment, it also starts to degrade as soon as you make it. Okay, and it also requires ongoing investments of energy and outside inputs to keep it functional. For example, this little structure is starting to erode. We need to do some repair work on that. But nonetheless, it produces more than it consumes. That's the opposite of the degenerative, which consumes more than it produces. This produces more. And it also conserves more resources than it degrades. Okay? And it serves multiple functions. So what's going on here is this is a simple check dam put across the flow of what was once a bare bedrock drainage. And when the water flowed after good rain, it would flow for about 3 hours, and then the flow would stop. But since this little structure was put in, now we have a seep spring that was never there before. And this spring continues to flow for a matter of 3 weeks after a good rain. Okay? And so how is that created? Well, this little speed hump in the flow is formed It slows down the water enough that soil, sediment, organic matter accumulates behind, creating a very porous, fertile sand trap that absorbs the water and slowly releases it, enabling the spring to happen. Okay? So we don't have to just kill springs, we can help create them. Okay? This is the juicy stuff. And it not only creates the spring, but all this other life and all the wildlife coming to visit over a much longer period of time. So we start cycling the water through many more life forms, many more potentials than existed before. This is the juicy stuff. But we can do better than that. We can not only be generative, we can be regenerative in our investments and our creations. So how does that differ from the other two? Well, unlike the others, it can repair, reproduce, and regenerate itself. Okay? And it starts to grow and improve once it is made, rather than degrade. And at the end of its life, it can degrade, but it has a long spell of improving. And it does not require ongoing investments or imported energy and outside inputs to keep it functional. It works with the local. It produces more than it consumes. And it not only conserves more than it degrades, it goes much further than that. It improves the health of its surroundings and the world while serving many functions. Whoops. So this is my friend Van Clothier, and he is standing beside a rock structure, but it's only one rock high as opposed to many rocks high like the previous one. And his rock structure, it can be no better than generative. Okay? Because it's not alive. The key thing about regenerative strategies is they are living. Okay? So this is not living, but it has set up the conditions to allow the life to flourish and go further. So this is a stretch of the watershed he was working on. It was much larger than this. It's just a small section outside Silver City, New Mexico. And the riparian wetlands was basically dead. And it's the case in Arizona. We have killed off over 90% of our wetlands and surface water flows. In less than 100 years, we've done this. But the great thing is Van is doing the opposite. So with these simple rock structures, he's converted this into stretches like this. And you can't even see the rock structures. There's one there, and there's many more, but you can't really see them. These things are very simple. They're only one rock high, not multiple rocks high, so it's really hard to mess up, okay? And the other thing is, since it's only one rock high and you always seed the ground below, it's very easy for vegetation to grow up through it, whereas if it was many rocks high, that would be very difficult. And the key is not the structure, it's what it generates. It helps nudge that life. So here's a before, here's an after. It slowed the flow enough that more moisture infiltrated, more seeds germinated, which grow more vegetation, which do a much better job than the rock at slowing the flow and creating more. There's a little screw up here. They created a little waterfall effect. The rocks were tall there, but we want to create the speed hump effect. So the bottom rock, the downslope side, should be level with the bottom of the bed. That was messed up here, so we got a scour hole because we had a waterfall effect. If we don't have the waterfall effect, it's much more stable. But the nice thing is that created the anchoring trench in which rocks were then placed and everything was good. And once you've created the structure, the vegetation's growing through it and it's silted up, then you can do another one on top, but not until it's silted up. And then the bottom part acts as the spillway. You can get a free book on that at that website and also in my book, so I give you a lot of info as well. So Van is now at this location we were looking at before, standing on one of those one rock dams. And you can see just how much riparian grass is here. So it's so successful, the grasses are now growing uphill through capillary action up the banks. There's so much moisture now held there. And again, I want to really emphasize, it's not about the rock. It's not about the structure. It's just about how that was set up in the flow of water and sediment. And now that we've got all these grasses growing, they act like this living comb that is so much more dense and more effective at slowing down the water so more silts drop out. And the silts, what's that? The clay. That's what's the best at holding water. So then as those drop out, then the system can hold more water, and then more seeds germinate, which grows more grass, which can capture more silts, which can then hold more water, which can grow more grass, and it just keeps building on itself and building on itself. We get to step out of the equation. It's not about us. So to take this further, and I'm going to give you examples in the urban realm and all too, this is a meandering waterway, which is typical once you get more gradual slopes. We've got a pool on the outer bend, then we've got the crossover riffle and the straightaway, and another pool on the bend. So looking from above, that's what it looks like. Looking from the side, this is what it looks like. And so at the straightaway, that is where large sediment naturally settles out of the flow. So we need to tap into the natural pattern of flows and work with that instead of just arbitrarily building structures. Because again, it's not about the structure, it's about reading the pattern and working with the pattern. So we're working with the natural systems, okay? So we want to put a sediment trap, which is what a one-rock dam is, where sediment wants to accumulate, okay? If we do that, here you can see there's the pool, there's the crossover riffle. So looking at the sideways view, the elevation view, the crossover riffle is the hump in the flow. If we put a one-rock dam there, we raise the hump slightly in relationship to the pool. And then the waterway itself becomes a higher capacity water harvesting system. Probably don't think that creeks, streams, rivers, they are water harvesting features, okay? As well as water moving features. So, and this is a fantastic book that goes more into that, and my new appendix, which these guys gave me a lot of input on, does as well. So let's then look at these two paths I see we can take, the path to scarcity or the path to abundance. On the path to scarcity, we're not paying any attention to natural flows. So we tend to plant on mounds that drain water, topsoil, and sediment out of the system. We send our household wasted waters out of the system. So over time, the carrying capacity, the fertility, the hydrology of the system is depleted. We become worried about this, maybe scared to be in the city on the path to scarcity. Ba-boom. And it's no wonder in this scenario that 30 to 70% of the drinking water consumed by a typical U.S. household is used to irrigate the landscape. Okay? Drinking water. Think of all the money we spend purifying that water and all the infrastructure we have to maintain to deliver it to your house and drinking water standards. And we just put it in the dirt? That's madness. So we can shift to the path to abundance, where we instead plant within or beside sunken water harvesting earthworks to capture all the rain instead of draining it. We also capture the leaf drop instead of raking or blowing it away. So then we get a closed nutrient loop as that breaks back down into the soil and feeds back to the plants. And then in times of jumped ahead of myself. Then we can take the raised access ways. We can take that runoff and direct it into these same basins. That runoff becomes run on, and that's right on. Okay? And then in times of no rain, we can take the household gray water and send that into the same rain garden. So the rain gardens in the dry times become gray water gardens. This way the carrying capacity is steadily enhanced. Things get better. We become excited about this, maybe happy, and then the old joke is we can take these here buns and do a little bun dance on the path to abundance. And that's the path we want to take. So instead of having drinking water be the only irrigation source, we want rainwater to be the primary source, the true local highest quality water. We can augment that with gray water and air conditioning condensate. And then we only use that utility water or drinking water as an absolute backup only in times of supplementary need. So where do we do all this? So I like to emphasize, let's do it within 30 feet of our hardscape surfaces, okay? Because then we can increase the amount of available rainfall. So this is a highway in southwestern Arizona where it's so dry, all we have is creosote, but yet along this street there is a linear forest of mesquite and acacia trees that nobody planted, nobody takes care of, nobody waters, and yet how is it possible that that exists where otherwise we only have creosote? It's because of the runoff off of the street. So we have 3 times the available rainfall here, because it gets that rain plus the runoff, which becomes run-on. So let's mimic that system. Let's recognize the natural process and mimic it. So around our homes, within our parking lots, along our streets and sidewalks, patios, driveways, we can do the same. So within this shaded area, we have at least twice the rainfall that we do beyond it, because we get the rainfall and this run-on. And then we can also supplement it with household gray water. So this is a way in these areas you can double, triple, or even more your available rainfall. Okay? And if we set up landscapes and relationships to buildings this way, then the buildings become generators of more life. Okay? All right. So it's key then, within these basins, one last little tip. Make sure you're 10 feet away from the wall of the house before you do this, so you don't saturate the area under your walls, okay? And then within these basins, we want to maximize the living and organic ground cover. So this is a nightmare vision for me. Unfortunately, that is not a staged photograph. It's a true happening. That guy is literally vacuuming his yard. So with good intentions, he graveled his yard to reduce the water consumption, but he spent so much money on those mined and ground mountains that he didn't want anything covering up his investment, okay? So this is a real problem, okay? So this is a good intention, but it's actually depleting life. It's degenerating life. And so I'm not against rock or gravel being used. I just think we need to be judicious. So I'd rather have organic matter under my plantings, because that way if leaves drop, then it's okay. Because I'd started with organic matter, that's just more. And then this organic matter greatly increases the rate at which water infiltrates, greatly decreases the rate at which water is lost to evaporation, while improving fertility, and I'll say more on that later. So this development is under construction. It's a co-housing development, could be an office complex, a school, or other things. But all the roofs drain to the common landscape, which has been broken up into a series of 18 to 24-inch deep basins. And then the feet stay high and dry because the raised pathways go between it all. Now, if we had left things like that, it would have been a real problem, because with those clay soils and the puddling water, we could have bred a lot of mosquitoes. But what we were missing was the organic matter, the sponge. So we put in 4 inches of organic matter on the surface of the soil and then planted a number of living pumps. So now we get 2 inches of rain fall in less than an hour. All of it infiltrates in less than 20 minutes because the sponge is in place. Not only is the sponge in place, the great thing is this landscape, now that it's established, is irrigated only with passively harvested rainwater and household wasted water, previously wasted household water. So no drinking water used. This is an overview of the site. The rectangles with the numbers of the buildings. The slope is from lower left to top right. The shaded area is the common landscape, and the circles are the trees. So there is no stormwater detention retention basins at the bottom of the site. There's no storm drains because there's no runoff off of this site. We had a civil engineer add up the cumulative storage capacity of all these micro basins, and together they exceeded the capacity of a conventional system by 10 times. So not only is this a superior flood control system, it is also the foundation of a water sustainable landscape. So it's the integration is what's key. So now I mentioned that household wastewater is used there too. So this is a graph from Tucson. In Tucson, about 45% of the drinking water consumed in the household is used to irrigate the landscape. Now I want you to then compare to this area here of the washer, faucets, and shower. Well, if you take that part of the pie, if that gray water were to be directed outside, that would meet most of the outdoor water needs. So let's then look at combining rainwater harvesting and gray water harvesting, starting just with rainwater. If we want to live within our on-site water budgets, let's say we have a small house with 9,000 gallons of water coming off its roof in a typical year. This would be for a Tucson scenario. I can irrigate 3 low water use native food-bearing shade trees per year, because that's my water need, that's my water income, it's all working. And all I need for the irrigation system is these simple water harvesting earthworks. But if I want a higher water use plant, like a citrus that needs 8,000 gallons a year, I only get 1 tree, not 3, because I'm living within that budget. And this is not a native, so it's not adapted to our dry seasons. It's going to need water in the dry time. So I can supply that with a gravity-fed gray water system. Okay? And then if I want a vegetable garden, well, there I'm going to need a tank, because it's not you really shouldn't be putting gray water on your leafy greens or your tuber crops. So I recommend the tanked rainwater for the garden in the dry times. So that all works. But what if we wanted to first use this rainwater inside the house? Well, we could send it to the washing machine and get 750 loads of clothes washed with this amount of rainwater before then sending the gray water to the landscape. So we get more for less. Or we could send it to the shower, 900 showers before we send it to the trees. It's key that we look at some simple principles when harvesting the gray water. You guys are probably all up on this, but I just want to make sure everyone's got it. So first off, we got to use the right soap. So this is from Art Ludwig, one of your great local heroes in gray water. So when he created his soap, Oasis brand soap, for his master's studies, he compared a tomato plant, which he had grown on gray water with his soap, doing great, one with the control of fertilized water, and then one on tide gray water. It's pretty much dead. So it's very important to use the right soap. Make sure there's no sodium or salt in your soaps. You cannot trust the labels. They're just lies and marketing. So Trader Joe's, 7th generation, they say they're great. Most of their products are not, okay? Because if you look at the ingredients, they're rife with salt, sodium. You also want to avoid boron and chlorine. If you want to bleach your clothes, use hydrogen peroxide, not chlorinated bleach. And I have a lot more info on the gray water harvesting page on my website on this. But it's important not only to use the right soaps and all, but also that we discharge the gray water as high in the soil profile as possible. Why is that? Well, this is a great graph from Art's book, The Builder's Gray Water Guide. And here we're looking at the depth of the soil. So right at the top 3 inches of the soil, we have about 100 million beneficial soil microorganisms per gram of soil. But as we drop to, say, 3 feet below the surface, now we've only got about 1,000 beneficial microorganisms per gram of soil. And those beneficial microorganisms, they are what is going to digest and transform everything that's coming out the gray water pipe and convert it into fertility, growth, good things. Okay? So this is why we want to discharge the gray water as high in the soil profile where we have maximum life, so they can transform it into maximum beneficial life further. Okay? This goes contrary to the conventional plumbing codes, which say that you have to tank your gray water, which turns it into black water, gets septic and stinks, and then you have to discharge it deep beneath the surface. Thankfully, these laws are changing due to many of the people in this room and beyond. Gray water harvesting can be as simple as throw a hose over a branch of a tree and shower outdoors in the summer months if you don't want to deal with plumbing, or it can be more elaborate. And I oftentimes like to have a 3-way valve that lets me send the water to the landscape or the sewer, depending on what I'm sending down the drain or soil conditions. But I like to discharge it into a level-bottomed mulch basin many times so I get even infiltration of the water, with a perennial plant being the core piece, not annual plants. So I've always got a plant living and interfacing with that goodness. There's many ways you can tap gray water. The laundry to landscape's a great strategy. This is another multi-standpipe. Here's the sewer pipe. We put 3 additional pipes next to it, each labeled with the tree that pipe directs the water to. Every time we do a load of wash, we take the drain hose and stick it in a different pipe. So it moves the water to a different tree each time. And this is a key thing with your gray water. You don't want to concentrate all the household gray water in one spot, because you could risk getting anaerobic conditions where too much water in too small space, things could get stinky. So I like to spread the water out, spread the wealth. Okay? And in Tucson, we have now mandated that all new homes must be constructed with gray water harvesting stub outs. That's a section, yeah. So that's a section of pipe put in the wall at the time of construction, put in the wall or the floor that people can later access to put in a three-way valve or whatnot to then direct the water to the landscape should they want to. And it's much cheaper than having to retrofit everything. It's better to have it in place at the beginning. So we've learned some lessons, though. When we first created this ordinance, it largely failed. Okay? I was on the Citizens Advisory Committee trying to shape the ordinance, and I wanted every gray water fixture or source to have its stub out set up in such a way that you could gravity feed the water out. Okay? But the builders really fought me on that. They wanted to make the system easier for them to install. So I understand that. We all want to make things easier for ourselves. But by doing so, it made it much harder for the homeowner. Because what ended up happening is they laid the parallel gray water pipe with the black water pipe 3 feet below the surface where the sewer pipe was. So now all gravity options were off. You had to do a tank and pump system, which is much more expensive. But then they also ran that pipe under the concrete drain, or under the concrete driveway. Okay? So if anyone wanted to hook up, they had to first find the pipe, and then they had to cut through the driveway, and then they had to dig a hole twice as deep as is the norm for a tank and pump system. So even the tank and pump system was now twice the cost. So it's very important that when we design things, we design to the end user. You know, what's the desired effect? The desired effect here was not to make it easier on the builder. That's part of it, but that's not the ultimate. The ultimate was we wanted a reduction in water consumption, okay? A reduction in potable water consumption. And we wanted more people to interface with this. So now we've changed the ordinance that all fixtures must be set up for gravity feed of the gray water. Okay? And they must be more easily accessible. You can do tank and pump, but you have to have the gray water option. So that just went in last month. We'll see how things go. Okay? Now, even if you're in an apartment with no access to soil, you can still do gray water harvesting. So I like the bucket and chuck it system. So when waiting for the water to heat up, I collect it in a bucket, and then when I shower, I stand over that bucket so the water hitting my body goes into the bucket. And that's what I flush the toilet with, okay? Now, I don't stick it in the tank, I stick it in the bowl, okay? This is how the majority of the world flushes toilets, okay? And you just put it in slow and steady so nothing hops out, and everything works great. And so it's real key that we look at toilets. So 30% of the drinking water consumed by a typical household is in the toilet. This is why dogs and my friend Mike drink from the toilet bowl. They know what's in there, okay? It's insane that by law we have to put the drinking water in there, and by law we have to crap in that drinking water, okay? So we instantaneously on a daily basis then turn this pristine resource, drinking water, into a very dangerous substance, okay? So the most dangerous diseases to humans are waterborne diseases caused by fecal matter getting in the water. So the alternative that I love to practice is composting. So this is my household's thoroughly composted brown gold. So we thoroughly compost our human manure, all right? And we are now working with the the Arizona State Department of the Environment. We have permits for 24 test toilets around the Tucson area, site-built compost toilets. You can legally do a manufactured compost toilet with NSF approval, but they cost thousands of dollars. So that's too big a barrier. And we found site-built compost toilets are much more effective and a fraction of the cost. They just cost $300. So we're now testing these. We've already got back some of the initial results. We're getting A+++ ratings, testing for salmonella, E. coli, and so on. Everything's very safe. And not only is it safe, but what I love about this is it really reconnects me with the cycle of life. And it makes me realize I am not other, but I am a part of all of this, okay? And I thrive on this, all right? Because I realize I'm not alone, okay? And I can help regenerate more potential. I can help make things better with something I gotta do every day. So what my practice is, and sorry I'm going to push things a little here, is I like to wake up in the morning and I like to pick an orange from my orange tree right outside my door when it's on in fruit. And I pick that orange and I go to the composting toilet and I either sit or squat upon it depending on my mood that day, and I peel the orange as I'm doing my business. And I like to do a unipeel. And then from that larger peel, I can peel smaller pieces as needed. And I wipe myself with the white inner side of the peel. Because it's like nature's wet wipe, okay? And it's got the same feeling, but better. And it leaves me with this fresh citrus scent, okay? And just the whole feeling of it all is just amazing. I mean, it's so appealing. Okay? And then I just put the peels right back into the compost unit with everything else. And a year later, after it's thoroughly composted, it all goes right back to the citrus tree, under the tree. Okay? Full cycle. And the fruit just keeps tasting better and better each year. And even better still, when people come over, it's for a meal or whatnot, it's a much more intimate affair, okay? Because they ask, how I fertilize the trees and all. And I say, well, let me tell you. And you're actually eating something that was once me. Okay? And there's other waters and nutrient flows we can tap into. So air conditioning condensate. So the atmospheric moisture that condenses around the coil of the unit and all, in a dry season, a home unit, that's just about 25 gallons a day. Not much, but it's, not 25, quarter gallon a day. Not much, but it's still a quarter gallon a day, and that water should be directed at a plant, your air conditioning condensate spring. It'll be more here because you guys are more humid. And then in the dry season, it's 18 gallons. I'm sorry, not the dry season. In the humid season, it's 18 gallons a day. That's a home unit. But for a commercial unit, it can be thousands of gallons a day. So this is at the University of Arizona Architecture and Landscape Architecture building. So this whole landscape is irrigated from the waste stream of that building. So 100,000 gallons of air conditioning condensate a year come from these 3 air conditioning units, okay? Which are then directed into this landscape. So this is harvesting rainwater. Gray water from the drinking fountains goes into the landscape and the condensate. And it's an amazing outdoor classroom and a true oasis. And so they have an 11,000 gallon cistern in the building which captures the rainwater and the condensate. And they have a recirculating pump. So there's always this fountain feature with a pond. They have 4 ecotones of the Sonoran Desert: the wetlands, the uplands, the lowlands, and the canyons. And within the wetlands, they're raising endangered fish and frogs. And when you walk through here, I mean, the frogs are hopping all over the place. And the water is just writhing with the fish. There's great herons coming to visit this. And we're on the university campus, which is in the middle of town. Okay, we've got resident roadrunners and all. The life that this attracts is amazing. And the owls and the hawks. This is where you want to be. You don't want to go in the indoor classroom. Okay, and so it's going further than that. I don't know if you can see the faint stairwell shadow there. There used to be a stairway. When they expanded the building, they took that out. And if you can see along here, there's you can see where there used to be some brick. All that was put into the landscape. They broke it all up, and that creates the cobble through which the overflow water flows. Here's another example where that was done in a different way. They took this concrete drainage way, jackhammered it, left all the concrete chunks in place, turning a drainage way into an infiltration way, and then added a few native rock to make it look more natural. And then all this vegetation now is irrigated for free just by the water that flows through the system, which is from the parking lot, the runoff from the parking lot, and the roofs. Okay? And so the goal is to transform this area, and this is on the university plan, into this. This has been the model. It's been proven. And now to shift it. And so here are the mesa tops. There's the water source. Here's more water. And that is what is going to turn this into as green as that. We don't have to we don't have to import the water. We don't have to import the materials. It's already here. We just need to see it and work with it. Okay? So To convert that parking lot into a green park, which is the plan, this is what we need to do to reduce the heat island effect. This is a typical Tucson street, 36 feet wide, no trees in the public right-of-way, just on private land. So it's increasing summer temperatures with all this exposed hardscape. Whereas in Davis, California, at Village Homes, the street is only 18 feet wide, not 36. So it's much easier to shade the street with street side trees, which are grown just off the curb of the street. And the water from the street irrigates those trees. So here, this is from the one-page place assessment for Santa Barbara. I want you to see, in an average year of rainfall, you get about 17 to 18 inches of rain a year. Okay, that's great. That's your rainwater income. But you need to look at your potential loss to evaporation and evapotranspiration. So 18 inches a year, more or less, is what you get for income. But about 70 inches a year is what you lose potentially to evaporation. Okay? You're a dry land environment. Okay? Your potential loss is greater than your gain. So this, don't get freaked out about this. This is information. Okay? So now you can act. You have more to work from. So you need to do anything you can to reduce evaporation. How do you do that? Okay? Reduce temperatures. Okay, especially with climate change, this is even more important. So, how can you get more shading over hardscape? How can you reduce the hardscape? How can you mulch the surface of the soil with organic matter? How can you set up windbreaks to reduce the water loss to the wind? Okay, and so on. How can you enhance fertility? Move on this. Okay, and we're doing this along our streets. So, we recognize there's a lot of water flowing down the street. We recognized how hot the street was without any cover, so we're now cutting the street curb to allow street runoff into street-side basins. Once that basin, which is lower than the elevation of the street, fills up, the water backs up on itself, and no more comes in. This is not a flow-through system, it's a backwater or an eddy. And the pathway is as high as the top of the curb, so no water floods adjoining properties. So when this is filled up, the surplus water goes to the next one, fills that up. Okay? So it's largely self-maintaining because we're working with the patterns of water and sediment flow. We're not fighting them. So we actually clean the streets with this. We actually harvest mulch as well as water because the leaf drop falling on the street, when it rains, it all comes into the basin, okay, where it's a resource. All right? And how much water is this? Well, the average street in Tucson, the average mile of residential street, there's over 1 million gallons of rainfall per mile per year on just that section of neighborhood street. You get even more here in Santa Barbara. All right? So that's enough water to irrigate over 400 trees per mile, or 1 tree every 25 feet on both sides of the street, irrigated with nothing more than the runoff from the street. So can you guys see the potential here? Is every street in your community could be a passively shaded green belt, irrigated with nothing more than the runoff from the street, if we just made that happen. And it's up to us. All right? This is nothing new. This is ancient. So the traditional Native American cultures throughout the western U.S. practiced passive runoff harvesting. So here is an arroyo, and we've got the crops growing in the floodplain next to the arroyo, or the waterway. Sometimes they would create a simple weir that would direct more water out of the floodplain, out of the drainage into the floodplain, or they'd plant in the waterway itself. Well, our streets are our waterways. They are the arroyos in the built environment. So let's treat them as such. And going back here, oops, not too far. So this is the waterway. This is the floodplain. But this curb keeps them apart. Okay, so let's bring them back together. This curb is the same problem as when we concrete our drainage ways. Okay? We remove the floodplain from its water course. We need to rejoin them. And in Tucson, we just passed a new ordinance that all new streets must be designed and built to harvest, infiltrate, at minimum, a half-inch rainstorm. Okay? We need to go further than this, but it's a huge shift. Because the way we currently build all our roads is to drain 100% of the water out of the system. So now we're going to harvest the majority of the water that falls on the system. okay, to grow more shade, more life, to generate rather than degenerate the potential and the carrying capacity, okay? And as we do so, we've been very successful in our neighborhood. We've got so much water and mulch being harvested that the vegetation is going like crazy. So footpaths are starting to get blocked by the growth. All right? So this problem is the solution. This is great. So the key is to then prune these trees, but to hold on to the prunings. So 12 to 14% of the solid waste stream of in a typical city is mulch and organic matter. So instead of sending it to the dump, we're now cutting it up and putting it right back into the planting areas below the trees. Okay? And we have taken brush and bulky and converted it to chipped and mulchy. So brush and bulky is twice a year people put on their yard trimmings on the side of the curb and their furniture and stuff, and then that's taken off to the dump. Well, now, 3 weeks prior to brush and bulky, we have a neighborhood-wide pruning workshop showing people how to prune. This way the city doesn't have to do the pruning. Gets more people involved, more people meeting one another, builds community. And then we have put all the prunings on the side of the road, and then a week later a chipper shredder service comes, chips it all up, and then either puts it right back where it came from so people can mulch their own earthworks, or it goes to the community garden or another spot in the neighborhood. And we've had researchers at the U of A doing a lot of research on this. We found that trees associated with street-side water harvesting earthworks with organic mulch are 33% larger than those without, which equates doubling of the carbon sequestration of the tree, a doubling of the food production of the tree. And not only does this mulch enhance the trees, but it also enhances the soil itself. And it greatly increases the soil sequestration of the carbon sequestration of the soil. In addition to that, we found that when we have these street-side basins with organic mulch, they have 10 times the bioremediation potential of rock mulch. Why? It's because that organic mulch, that carbon-based material, is the foundational food source of the soil food web, the beneficial soil microorganisms. And so if we're going to maximize them, we have to give them more food, and we don't have to go anywhere for it. It's already there. So we just put all that organic matter right back into the soil. And not only does this enhance the bioremediation potential, the also amazing thing is it enhances the water availability of the system. So if we have these beneficial microorganisms in place, namely the beneficial mycorrhizal fungi and beneficial bacteria, they tap in to the roots of the photosynthesizing plants with their roots of sorts, and thereby expanding the surface area of the photosynthesizing plant's roots by 700 times. 700 times, okay? And that's optimal conditions. Even if you don't have the optimal, even if you just double it, that's huge, okay? So the fungi and bacteria give the plants water and minerals, and the plants in turn give them sugar, carbohydrates, through the photosynthesizing process. So it's this wonderful, beneficial, mutual cooperative engagement. And that's a hint we can take from. All right, so this is all integration. And now I want to take the integration even more, beyond water, beyond fertility, beyond working with your neighbor, to looking at working with the sun. And in the revision of my book, I lay out 7 integrated design patterns. There's many more, but these are just some of the core ones. And again, like watching and learning how water and sediment flows, you need to tap into how these things flow. So, I want you all to stand up right now. Okay? And we're going to do a little sun dance. And I really hope that none of you ever tell me or anybody else the sun rises due east and sets due west year-round. Because if you tell anybody that, you are showing them you're under-aware. You're under-awareness of how the sun moves through the sky. Because the sun only rises and sets due east and west 2 days of the year. That's the spring and fall equinox. And that's the same all around the globe. Okay? Otherwise, in the winter months at this latitude, it's more in the south part of the sky in the winter, and it starts to move to the north part of the sky in summer. So let's look at this now. So hopefully you can all see me. I'm going to stand here. I want you all to have your feet with your toes pointing. We're going to say that the screen is due south. Okay, so your toes pointing due south. All right, and now I want you to take your hands together and with your arms straight point due east. Okay, and that is where the sun rises when? And the equinox, yes. But let's do the summer solstice. So here at this latitude in Santa Barbara, the sun will rise about 28 degrees to the south of due east. Point there. Okay, with your arms straight if you can. And then at noon, the sun on the winter solstice will be about 32 degrees off the horizon. And then it'll set 28 degrees to the south of due west. Now keep your right hand where it is at the setting sun location, and with your left hand review where the sun's path is on the winter solstice. Okay? Where is it? It's in the south part of the sky. And is it in a large part of the sky? No, it's just in a little part of the sky, okay? So the sun's always to the south and always low in the horizon. All right, now let's shift to the spring and fall equinox. Where does the sun rise? Due east, yes. Okay, and then on the spring and fall equinox at noon, the sun will be about 56 degrees off the horizon. And then it sets due west. So with your right hand where it is, review with your left hand, where is the sun on the spring and fall equinox, March 21st and September 21st? Is it in more of the sky? Yes. Is it in the south part of the sky? Yes. All day long. It's only in the south part. Okay? But it's moved more to the north since the winter solstice. Okay? Now on the winter solstice, the sun is the opposite of winter. So let's point due east, and then point 28 degrees to the north of due east. That's where the sun rises. Got to go further north. So that's where the sun rises on the summer solstice morning. And then at noon, it's about 79 degrees off the horizon. Try and stretch your fingers to touch that sun, because we're trying to get a good stretch here. And then it sets 28 degrees to the north of due west. Now keep your right hand where it is, and this is where you get the awesome stretch. Review. Yes! 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 Okay, so where is the sun in the sky now? All day long in the south? No. When is it in the south? Yeah, only in the middle of the day. In the morning, early morning, afternoon, it's in the north. About 9 a.m., it'll be due east. 3 p.m., due west, and then it's to the north, okay? And then it's in much more of the sky. So this is key that you realize where the sun is. Now, go back to doing the stretch, because if you start working the sun, if you start tapping I do that to wake you up. But also, I think it's key that we literally embody this knowledge and this information. Otherwise, it's not going to work for us, okay? So, using this, the city of Davis, California did a study where they compared two buildings identical in every way except their orientation to the sun. They found that this orientation with the long wall facing south, the winter sun, and the short walls facing east and west, was 17 degrees warmer in winter than this, and 24 degrees cooler in summer than this orientation. Okay? 17 degrees warmer in winter, 24 degrees cooler in summer than that orientation. That is huge, and it costs nothing. Okay? And just to make sure these images are clear to you, this is the summer months, morning, noon, afternoon. This is the winter months, morning, noon, afternoon. This is the summer months, morning, noon, afternoon, and the winter months, morning, noon, afternoon. Okay? And you can see how sun and shadow play. So in the winter months, you want full sun hitting that south-facing side all day for the free heat and light. And then in the summer months, you don't want a long wall facing that rising and setting sun. Because where do you have the bulk of your insulation? It's in your roof and your ceiling. It's not in your walls, and you don't have it in your windows. So you want to minimize the unwanted exposure to the sun with a short wall facing east and west. So this is some friends of mine in this trailer in Boulder, Utah. It used to be oriented this way, the wrong way. Told them about this study, then they reoriented it this way. This is now the right way, with the morning sun hitting the short wall on a summer morning. And then this is the south-facing wall. That will be in full sun all winter long. So what they did before they moved their trailer, they were paying $300 a month in winter, just keeping the thing at 60 degrees to keep the pipes from freezing. They all had to wear down jackets because it was not comfortable. And in summer, they really sweat like pigs. But now, by reorienting, they have reduced their winter utility bills from $300 a month to $50. That's the only thing they did. They were only looking at orientation. Okay, but we can take it further. And again, this is nothing new. This is at Canyon de Chelly in New Mexico, the White House ruins. So they not only oriented the buildings correctly, because these long walls are facing south, but they also incorporated it with an overhang of the sandstone. So they get full sun in winter, and they maximize their shade in summer. Okay? These are both taken at noon on the opposing solstices. And not only they were so tapped in, not only with the orientation of their buildings, but also their lunar and solar clocks. This is at Fajada Butte, these boulders in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. Behind that is the spiral. And at the solstice, it is bisected directly in half with a dagger of light. Okay? It also marks the solstices. It also marks the lunar calendars with the shadow cast by the rocks with the light from the full moon. And I was amazed, when I found this, I thought it was mind-blowing. And so I went to Chaco to see it, but then I realized it is all over the Southwest. There are sun dagger sites everywhere, including just about in downtown Tucson on Tumamoc Hill. There's all these prehistoric villages, and it's riddled with these solar and lunar clocks. So I'm blown away by the consciousness of the people of the past and how this was a daily part of their lives. And it can be just as much so for us. So this is my one-car garage turned cottage, and I call it a garage. It's also a shed-sized condo, so I call it a shondo. I raised the roof to make room for 2 lofts. And when I did this, I worked the overhang window relationship to maximize winter sun. This is at noon on the winter solstice. You can see I'm maximizing the sun on the south-facing exposure of windows and wall. And then we're starting to heat up on the spring and fall equinox, so I want more shade at that time. I'm getting it. That line is the line of the shadow cast that time of day, that time of year. But I'm still getting a little bit of sun on the bottom floor windows. And then by summer, I don't want any direct sun, so it's all in shade. And I've enhanced that even more with a extendable awning, which gives me a wider shade corridor in which I can walk below. So the primary heater and cooler of my home is the orientation to the sun and then the overhang window relationship. Okay? And it's key that you use the correct windows. So if you get low-E windows, you're not going to get winter heat. The standard low-E windows. You have to get special low-E windows to give you the passive heat gain. All that's covered in my book. But here is our solar calendar. So right outside the upper window, we have a fishing pole, golf clubs, and ski pole, each showing the sportive season. And each sportive season marks the line of the shadow cast at noon at that time of year. So the golf clubs is the spring and fall equinox. There you can see the shadow line right on the golf clubs. And then on the summer solstice, it'll be the fishing pole right there. Okay? So there for everyone to see. And my 5-year-old nephew loves this. So we come out every morning and we see, all right, where are we in the year? Because that changing shadow, that's our calendar. Okay? But more than that, by building in this way in relationship with the flow of the sun and the shadow, the building heats and cools itself. It's not dependent on a mechanical air conditioning unit. Okay? And I'm going to give you a little nightmarish vision of air conditioners. I was researching air conditioners, and just a basic home air conditioning unit, the refrigerant in that unit, just the volume of refrigerant that's in that unit, well, first off, the refrigerant has over 1,700 times the greenhouse gas potential of carbon dioxide. So I did the calculation on this. If that refrigerant is released, then I would need to plant over 60,000 trees to sequester what was released by that little bit of refrigerant in my home air conditioner. And this is the same for all refrigerators, freezers, coolers. They're everywhere. Okay? Okay, that freaked the hell out of me, all right? So, but I'm not saying air conditioners are bad. What I'm saying is let's try and design out the need for that. And even if the need is still there, let's change the refrigerant. I think this is work we must do. And maybe our aim should be developing a refrigerant that sequesters rather than releases climate-changing gases. All right. That said, now we need to also look at not only the orientation, but the overhang and how we set up our landscapes. So we're layering all these different things. So if we set up the landscape like so, this is summer months, winter months, morning, noon, afternoon, we can maximize the shading in the morning and afternoon in the hot months while maximizing the sun in the winter months. Okay? And again, we can use the harvested water to irrigate all of this. And if you don't want to do the sun trap shape, which is kind of like a C facing the sun, you can do an L, which is this is a sun and shade trap, which is open to the southeast but closed to the north and the west. And this can create warm nooks in the morning, shady, cool nooks in the afternoon. And this is another example of that. This is the south-facing side of my brother and I's home. And we have our winter garden here. And then we put cisterns, above-ground cisterns, on the west side of the garden, creating this sun and shade trap. So in the morning, this is at 9 a.m., we get the sun burning off the frost on the cool mornings of the garden. So the garden starts growing better. By noon, the cisterns are in shadow, cast by the cisterns themselves and the tree between them. And then by 3 p.m., the whole garden, or almost the whole garden, is in shadow, cast by the cisterns and the tree. So this, the only water, not the only, 95% of the water we use to irrigate this garden is from the rainwater caught off the roof in these tanks. That would not be possible if we did not set up the cisterns in relationship to the sun in the garden this way. Because due to their placement at the hottest time of the day, these cisterns shade and cool the garden, so they use much less water. They don't evapotranspire so much. We've reduced that loss, okay? So our rainwater goes much further. This is the key, getting that integration going. The tanks also act as a privacy screen between us and the neighbor, and since they're concrete tanks full of water, there's an awesome fire break between us and the neighbor's rental unit, which has got a leaky roof and sketchy wiring. Okay, so there's likely going to be a fire coming from that. And we also need to maintain our winter sun access. So we want to avoid this, where if this is the south side, the winter sun side, we don't want to shade out our winter sun heat and light gain. Even if we plant a fully leafless deciduous tree, that'll block out over 50% of the potential heat and light gain. So we want to move the tree far enough to the south that it gives us shade but doesn't shade us in winter. So here's a little tool on how to use this. Lay these out in the book and on my website, but for this latitude, you have a 1 to 1.59 ratio at noon on the winter solstice, the day with the longest shadows. So you can stand on the south side of your house, and you can multiply the height of whatever you're going to plant at mature size, whatever you're going to build, by 1.59. And that will tell you how long a shadow it will cast. So you can make sure it's far enough to the south that there's no problem. Okay? And the sun will be due south at noon. So this guy is pointing to due south. Does that make sense to people? Okay? And but then in the morning and afternoon, the sun's lower in the sky. Don't worry about the sun before 9 a.m. or after 3 p.m. It's too low in the sky. It's not giving you enough light and heat. Just don't worry about it. But between 9 and 3, those are the ideal hours we want the sun. Now, it may be that you're in too urban a setting or there's too much established vegetation, so you can't maintain the sun between 9 and 3, so just worry about 10 a.m. and 2. Okay? And I give ratios for all these in my book and website, but your 9 a.m., 3 p.m. ratio here is 1 to 3. So there you would, let's say, this is that south. I would go to the easternmost corner of my easternmost window. I would look at what's the angle of the sun at 9 a.m. It's 47 degrees from due south. So that's where the sun will be at 9 a.m. on the winter solstice. And then I can do the 1-to-3 ratio to figure out how tall something can be and how far away it needs to be so it doesn't shade me. And then I go to the westernmost corner, the westernmost window, and I do the same thing. Now I know the area I want to leave open. And if I can't manage that, I shrink it to the 10-to-2 hours. Okay? So just want you guys to know that tool exists if you want it. All right? And I give a lot more info on that in my books, particularly the first book. Then, solar rights. When I raised the roof of my one-car garage to create the lofts and turn it into a garage, I raised the roof only so high, as high as I could without blocking my neighbor's winter sun access. Okay, so in the winter solstice, they get full sun through their south-facing windows. Okay, if I had done it to code, or if I had done what the code allowed, I would have totally shaded out their winter solar access. Now, when I talk to people about this, like, oh, you're such a good guy, you're so altruistic. Well, actually, you could say I'm very selfish. Because if I were to shade out their winter sun access, then they would have no choice but to burn more coal at the utilities power plant to provide their light and their heat, okay, and power. And that would then contaminate the environment and the atmosphere for us all and affect the climate as well. Okay, and this is nothing new. So I went to the Acoma Pueblo in New Mexico, and this is a continuously inhabited mesa for over 1,000 years. And so the people up here for over 1,000 years have had a solar rights ordinance, which means nobody on the south side can build so high that they shade the neighbors to the north. Okay, and this is just from a different vantage point, okay? Looking east, looking west. So if they could do it, why can't we? And pre-Spanish, they had south-facing windows with glass made out of mica, 2 inches thick. Okay, and then we can look, why even look at all this stuff? You're like, yeah, I thought you were the water guy. Why are you going off on the sun? Because all of this is interrelated. Anytime we consume energy, we're consuming water at the power generation plant. Okay? And how much? Well, it's interesting that just in Santa Barbara, the energy used to move and treat your water just within city limits is enough power to provide all the power needs for almost 2,000 homes. Okay, because they're moving so much of that around. This, just want you to know it exists. You can go on to the appendix, Water Energy Carbon Nexus appendix in my book, and you can see different household practices like drying clothes, or water heating, lighting, learning entertainment, heating the space, cooling the space. And you can see, based on the practice, say solar clothes dryer or a clothesline, compared to an electric clothes dryer, what's the difference? Electric clothes dryer uses 6% of your household energy. Clothesline, 0. And then you can see how much energy is consumed, how much water is consumed, and how much carbon is emitted. Just want you to know that exists. We can also look at harvesting the wind. So let's say your home or its windows are not oriented ideally for passive ventilation. Well, you can change that with your landscape. So if you create a high pressure zone, so when the wind is blowing and hits a barrier, it will create a high pressure. And then on the other side of your house, you can create a low pressure zone that's blocking the wind. So it creates the low pressure. And then the air will be sucked through your house for free, okay? And so you can just build on the simple pattern with your landscape or your window choice. You can decide where the casement window opens. Okay, and I've got a whole appendix that lays all kinds of simple wind patterns which mimic water patterns. So you can do the same. Now I want to look at this map by John Wesley Powell. He proposed that the western United States be delineated by its watershed boundaries. So each of these colored areas is a different state, okay, with the boundary of the watershed as opposed to an arbitrary political boundary. And now what if we had done as he proposed? I bet we would have far fewer conflicts in the West around water, because we would realize we all share the same water course and catchment. And so his definition of a watershed is that area of land, a bounded hydrological system within which all living things are inextricably linked by their common water course, and where, as humans settled, simple logic demanded that they become part of a community. Okay? So what I love about that is if that's how we bounded our communities, our neighborhoods, our states, then anytime we refer to the boundary, we refer to the fact that we are in a community. Okay? A naturally bounded one that goes beyond just the human community. It's also the water community, the wildlife, the soil, so much more. So this is a map that, a sign actually, that we've put up in my neighborhood. We've put these up all over the neighborhood. And it's a map of the Tucson Basin. And this is the Santa Cruz River, the Pantano River, and the Rito River. And then this is the basin itself, broken up with the turquoise lines by a whole bunch of subwatersheds. Okay? And then the blue line between is the waterway between those ridge lines. And so then this is my neighborhood, my arbitrarily bounded neighborhood in the yellow. So what we did is we marked on there what are the watershed boundaries of our neighborhood, because we have two washes, two drainages that flow through our neighborhood. So this is our true subwatershed neighborhood. So this is then saying to the those in the neighborhood, hey, we need to talk to those above us, below us, because we're all connected. And what we do affects them, what they do affects us. And could we live and work in such a way that we enhanced our quality of life and theirs in such a way that we influenced them to do the same for us? And now I want to show you some examples of how we're doing just that. So this is my home in 1994, right after I purchased it. Got a great deal on the house because it was about to be condemned. I opened up the front door, it fell into the front room. I opened up the window, it fell into the yard. And I saw burn marks all over the walls from the sketchy wiring, and there was leaks from the roof all over. This was just a little too much to take in right after purchasing a home. So I had to sit down and regain my thoughts. So I sat down on the only chair I could find, which was the toilet. And upon doing so, I fell through the floor with the toilet into years of accumulated effluent. Okay? Because the pipes were all shot. So it was an awesome vantage point from which to observe the plumbing. So my to-do list grew. But not only was the house in a bad shape, so was the neighborhood. So much of the neighborhood public right-of-way looked like this. It was a bare solar oven-like experience. And so neighbors didn't talk much because you didn't want to be out and about where you could talk. And in fact, just before we moved into the neighborhood, the neighborhood had just rejoined after being two separate divisive entities. Okay? So we went around and talked to a bunch of our neighbors, knocking on doors and helping them with different needs. And we set up potluck dinners and we said, hey, what do we want as a community? What do we want to share? And we all wanted more life. We all wanted more exchange. We wanted to know more people. We wanted to talk to one another. So we organized an annual tree planting project, which since 1996 has planted over 1,275 trees in the neighborhood, all with volunteer neighborhood labor. And so here you get everyone working together. We talked to the local crossing guards at the school, and we said, hey, if we plant a tree, will you water it? And the response was, no, I'm not going to be around to see that tree. I'll be dead and before it's of size. So we said, well, have you thought about the kids you're helping cross the street every day? Couldn't this be one of your legacy projects? What if this tree were to be watered by you and it were to grow so that the kids could bring their kids under the same tree that you helped grow? And then we had them. So yes, I will bring water. I will water that tree in its time of establishment. And since we didn't water harvesting earthworks, once established, it didn't need any more water. And then this is the right-of-way in front of my brother and I's house 2 years after the planting. Things are really starting to grow. And the key thing is we plant the rain before we plant the vegetation. So we've got the water harvesting earthworks, and the paths drain into that before we planted. And then this is where the driveway used to run down took the water through the carport and out the back door and flooded the neighbors. So we put a berm there. Now look at all the water we caught. So you first plant the water, and then 2 years later, look at all the wildlife and the plant life. And we did not plant any of that. We just seeded, okay? Then we noticed the street flowed such a wonderful water course when it rained. We cut the curbs, and we did so on a Sunday morning when no one from the city was watching. We only did one curb cut because we wanted to learn. We wanted to make sure we had it right. And we made sure we did very clean cuts because the goal is to improve public property, not make it worse. And we learned that we needed to make the pathway at least as high as the curb so we didn't flood adjoining properties. Lesson learned, fixed, moved on, did more. Neighbors saw how well this worked. They wanted to do likewise. So we called the city and said, hey, can we make this legal? So we had a number of meetings. And things are going really well, except somewhere through the process, they happened to drive by my house, and I got really mad and called me very angrily and said, hey, we just drove by your house, and we saw you already cut the curbs. What the hell is going on? And I said, don't worry. I actually did it 3 years ago. Everything's working awesome. Can we use this as an experimental pilot project? And they went for it. So now it is legal throughout the city to do curb cuts, you can do it with a licensed contractor the way we did it, or with larger equipment like this. But they've improved upon it because now they require that you buff the cut, and makes it look even better. Okay, and I think this is key because we want people to want to do it even just because it looks hot. Okay, not just because it functions really well. And if you don't want to do the curb cut, a less expensive option is to do a curb core. It's only a 4-inch diameter core. And it does clog more readily, but it's an easy way to unclog. And it doesn't get as much water in, but still gets a heck of a lot of water coming in than it did before. So this is what it was before we started. This is what it is 10 years after we started planting the rain and the water and the vegetation. And what's awesome is back then the only wildlife we had were exotic pigeons. Now we've got over 24 native bird species that have returned. Okay, because we planted over 90% of the plants are native to the Tucson Basin. So their habitat was returned. And it's not just food for them, it's food for us. We selected food-bearing plants. And we put up this before sign because we forgot what it looked like. The only time I'd remember is when I do these talks. Okay? And a lot of our neighbors never knew what it looked like. So from the same vantage point at which the photo was taken, we put up this sign. And so people can see the change for themselves. And I think this is really important because then people see, wow, change actually is possible. Because we, in some ways, live in such the moment, we forget how things were or how things could be. So I think it's key to have these reminders front and center. So as I mentioned before, we also, 90% of the species, not 90, 100% of the species we planted generate food, medicine, craft materials, as well as wildlife habitat. So here's my sister-in-law harvesting the mesquite pods harvested from the mesquite tree, which we grind up and eat like carob. And we have honey from our backyard bees, chilies from a chili plant, olives from the olive, cholla buds from the cholla cactus. And here's my nephew harvesting the cactus fruits. And so as you're doing this out in the public right-of-way, more people see you, more people interact. You get to know more of your neighbors, so you live in more of a community, not just a housing development of strangers. And so we wanted to show others how to harvest the goodness. So we got a hammer mill we put on the back of a trailer, which we take to different neighborhoods. People can rapidly grind 5 gallons of whole mesquite pods into 1 gallon of flour in 5 minutes, which they can then sell for over $200 should they choose, or they can eat it for free. And because this flour sells for $14 a pound. And it slows the body's intake of sugar, so it's great for people with hypoglycemia and diabetes. It's a food and a medicine. And it reconnects us not only with the native vegetation of the place, the fauna that it attracts, but also the cultures of the place, of all the native cultures, and then the Spanish and the cowboys and all who tapped into this food, but we forgot, and now we're remembering. And we have these big celebrations, these mesquite fiestas around that, which is a truly locally based fiesta, based to this local native food, rooted to the seasons of our ecosystem. And so people try the mesquite pancakes with prickly pear syrup or any one of these other foods at the bake sale, and they get super excited and want to do likewise. So we show them how with this cookbook and with demonstrations and whatnot, and the example throughout the neighborhood. And it's spreading like wildfire. And we were so successful along the streets, we decided to take it in the street. So we went from an intersection like this to putting in a water harvesting traffic calming circle, which we got neighbors to plant to get more people invested. We planted painted a mural, which really slowed down traffic. But we used the wrong paint, so after a month it faded. But no problem. We put in a sculpture, which then points to different elements in the neighborhood to say, hey, this is where you are. This is the crossroads. And at the top is the name of the neighborhood, Dunbar Spring, made out of bicycle handlebars by the Bicycle Cooperative 3 blocks away. So it's an advertisement for a neighborhood business that takes thrown-away bikes and turns them into reusable things again. And at the very top is a weather vane of Gambel's quail. So quail used to be ubiquitous throughout the Tucson Basin, but they pretty much vanished from our neighborhood when it was developed. But we found with studies at the U of A that if just 10 to 15% of people's landscape is planted in native cover, that's enough habitat to bring back the Gambel's quail. This is all an example of that vegetation while also producing food for us. So people are doing this, and the Gambel's quail are coming back to our neighborhood. And then we created these pullouts or chicanes next to the stop signs, which then are 18, 24 inches deep, which capture still more water to grow more vegetation and slow more traffic. And with all these strategies, we're now harvesting over 2 acre-feet of water a year that previously just ran right out of the neighborhood. And this is just a fraction of what we can do. So we could easily do 20 times this in the public right-of-way. And that's just the super easy sites. We could do 40 times this. So to absolutely shift, a 180 shift of the neighborhood, of a drain of water, fertility, and potential, into one that's just building potential upon potential upon potential, for free, no outside inputs. We're using all that was already here, and we're working with each other. And when I say each other, I don't just mean the humans, I mean the microorganisms. I mean the wildlife, the bird life and all, that then are pooping out seed and planting more of this within the water harvesting features. It just keeps getting juicier and juicier. And now we're to the last 2 slides. And so then we're also doing art that says more, says the message. So within one of the water harvesting traffic calming chicanes, we have this sculpture of Sonora suckerfish. So the Sonora suckerfish used to be ubiquitous throughout the Santa Cruz River, which is just a half mile from my neighborhood. And 2 of its tributaries run right through my neighborhood. So less than 70 years ago, you used to be able to fish your dinner in my neighborhood, okay, and go for a swim, all right? All that's now gone. So the suckerfish sculpture is telling us of what we lost and to remind us that things weren't always as they are now. So that might be a little depressing, but I think it's also hopeful because it shows that it doesn't have to be as it is. And within the fish is a horned lizard in front of my nephew. So the horned lizard has adapted from living in these dry environments to be able to literally harvest rainwater off its back. So when it rains, it lifts its rear legs, it flares out its back to maximize the surface area, and the rainwater, via gravity, literally travels through microscopic gutters between its scales to its mouth. Okay? And thus, we put the sculpture in a water harvesting feature, harvesting water in a similar yet different way. And at the one-page place assessment, these are totem species we identified in our quick research. You likely could find even better ones for the Santa Barbara area. So how can you bring these to light? It's the canaries in the coal mine. Gauging, is the health of your community getting worse, staying the same, or improving? And what can you do to enhance things? And so with all that, I then come back to finish as I began by asking, what is the story of your place? What is your relationship to that place? And what is your role in the story of your place? Because to remind you again, you all absolutely have the power to determine what your role is, to build on your relationship with your place. And if you don't like the story of your place, you have the power to shift it. And it starts with you and your role in that story. You and others shifting that will tell another story. And it's my hope you live and tell a regenerative story. Thank you. All right, thank you for that. So real quick, want to let you know, you get a lot more info from these books and this website. And just June 13th, I released the new edition of Volume 1. And they're both for sale in the back. And it's special event price. Tap into that. Willing to sign it if you're into that, and even give you a little personalized blurb. But if those of you who already have Volume 1, I want to just tell you what's different. So Volume 1, I've added over 100 pages of new information, over 120 new images, dramatically revised 40 of the existing images. And for me, when I started this whole path, water was never it. Water was just the bait. Okay? It was the bait to get you to see a greater whole. It was the bait to get you to start to see patterns, natural flows, and to work with them. So what I've done with the expanded, revised edition is I've greatly expanded upon the other resources, the sun, the soil fertility, the wind, community, shade, how you can set up your water harvesting with all these other elements in an integrated way that you just explode the potential at no additional cost of materials, while greatly enhancing the positive you can do. And if any of you have never been exposed to either of these books, I recommend you start with the first one. That's the big picture, how you conceptualize it all as an integrated whole. And it helps you choose what strategies you want to use, tanks, earthworks, or both. While the second book, the green one, is just earthworks, planting the rain with all kinds of different strategies and step-by-step instructions how you do it. Okay? And I'd also like to ask you all to help me spread the word on this, because I'm a self-published author, so it all depends on word of mouth. Any means of media by which you can get the word out, I would greatly appreciate it. I got lots of good blogs on my website you can link to if you want as well. And please talk to all your libraries, public libraries, school libraries, and get them to carry these books. And on the Rainwater page of my book, I've even got some basic curriculums, draft curriculums that people can use for free, and a whole heck of a lot more. And you can go to YouTube Free Water, and you'll go to my YouTube channel and some cool videos. Okay. Yeah. Do we do any questions?
Anybody have any questions?
So we'll just take a few, because that was a long talk, but we got one right here.
How well is this spreading through the city of Tucson, and how well is this spreading through the city of Tucson, and to what extent is like the Department of Public Works getting on board with this?
Okay, so this is definitely spreading throughout the city and many other cities. As I mentioned before, we've now shifted the way roads have to be designed and built to harvest a minimum of a half inch of rainfall on that section of road. In addition, we now have, I mentioned the gray water harvesting stub out ordinance. Commercial landscapes must meet at least 50% of their irrigation needs with harvested rainwater, on-site harvested rainwater. We have a $1,000 gray water harvesting rebate. Anyone putting in a gray water system can get $1,000 back. We have a $2,000 rainwater harvesting rebate. And we're now also increased the amount of required cover of hardscape. We've doubled the amount of shade canopy that has to be over parking lots and all. We have to go a lot further, but things are really shifting in a nice way.
Yes, hi, thank you. My name is Madeline, and I live in Goleta. And I put a toilet in my garage, and I had it plumbed so I can switch from city water to either rainwater or gray water. And instead of bucketing my gray water out of the bathtub into the toilet, I'd like to pump it into my attic, into a holding tank, and I'd like your advice on how to somehow filter a small amount of gray water to keep using it and finally flush it down the toilet. Also, the city of Goleta doesn't want rainwater to go into their sewer. They don't want rainwater, so I have to do it secretly or use gray water that I bought from them, and then they'll take it back into their system. So how do I filter gray water to flush it down my toilet?
Okay, well, first off, I'd say probably what they don't want is rainwater going into the sewer pipes, but they don't want virgin rainwater going into the sewer pipes. If that rainwater went into your toilet, no issue, okay? Because that water would have gone down the toilet anyway. But I'd say there's going to be some challenges there. Anytime you store gray water in a tank, it gets stinky. So I typically don't advocate doing that because you're fighting the natural pattern. So I prefer direct discharge of gray water to the landscape or somewhere where it won't get stinky, instead it'll be utilized. And I like the bucket system. It's a little more of a hassle for you, but you're not storing that water. Now you can do systems doing what you're wanting, but they're a little more complex and costly because you're going to have to filter the water. And I cannot give you guidance on that, as those aren't systems that I install, but you can find those that do that. Yeah.
I've got a question about the soils, Brad.
Yeah.
I know a lot of the time in Tucson they have what's called caliche, is that right?
Yeah.
So when you're digging these basins for earthworks, around here we have a lot of clay soil. I've done a project for a food forest at my parents' house, and the swale is basically a foot deep, and when you dig out the soil, you kind of have a couple inches on the top that you take off. If you're lucky, that's good soil, but then the rest of it's just pure clay hardpan. So what do you do when you're just going right on top of clay hardpan or caliche? I mean, how do the plants thrive in that sort of soil?
Okay, sometimes what I'll try and do is not dig, but maybe I can put something on the surface that slows that water and creates a basin behind it. Okay. The other thing is I want to maximize the organic matter in the soil, so I might just load up the back of that swale with mulch and organic matter. May want to puncture through that hard pan a little more. First scrape off the topsoil, then scrape out the subsoil, and then put topsoil back. So that's work. The other thing you can do, if you've got a lot of rock in the area, in the appendix in the new book, I talk about these little one rock structures, not just the dams, but also just general landscape structures that slow water sediment, and they accumulate, so they start building the soil up. That's another option you have. And there's lots of folks you can talk to, like Daniel Wilson's got a business here doing a lot of great work. There's a lot of folks, you sounds like you're already doing work. And I would recommend you talk to all the locals here and say, hey, what have you found works? What have you found doesn't work? That's really specific to this area. And the other thing I'd just say is on the vegetation. I like to focus on native perennials first, because I find with our caliche, and it'll be the same with your hardpan, they're the best adapted at breaking through that for you. So I might even mix my exotics with my natives that way. I think Daniel wants to add something. Yeah, Daniel, go.
Always learning a lot from you. Thanks for coming. Always really nice. I wanted to ask you about taking the street water into the food-producing trees and such. I'm just wondering if you had any benefit from any empirical analyses of heavy metals and petroleum hydrocarbons.
Yeah, so thanks for asking that, because I meant to bring it up before. So with street runoff, are there issues with the plants uptaking the toxins coming off the street? So Mitch Pavlo-Zuckerman, the same guy I mentioned before, he's been doing a lot of research into that. And he's thus far, and we need to do more research, but thus far he's found there are no toxins being uptaken by the woody perennials into the parts of the plant that we eat. It's all staying, not all, the majority is staying in the top 3 inches of the soil. And and he's also found that, particularly when we've got the organic mulch in place, the beneficial microorganisms, their populations explode. The particular organisms that will eat, say the nitrates coming off the road from the oils and whatnot. Heavy metal's a harder thing. But we are getting some sequestering of a lot of those elements, and we're not getting delivery into the edible parts of the plant. Now, having said that, we're not planting leafy greens, we're not planting tubers, because those are uptaking heavy metals. And so we don't eat those in street side scenarios. But I'll grow datura for its nighttime pollination and to get that tuber root breaking up the hard soil, but I'm not going to eat datura anyway. Does that answer? So if you want to, you can I can give you later Mitch's contact info. So he's got some publications which you can get more of that data from.
Well, I just wanted to point out for people who are interested in learning more and applying it, just another pitch for Sweetwater Collaborative back here. There's workshops. You don't just have to figure it out all by yourself from a book. You don't have to do it alone. You can get with other people and learn that way too and have fun also. So right back here you can sign up for the bulletin and know what's going on. That's all.
Any more questions?
Well, I guess I got one.
Back here.
I don't know if it's a question really, but down in the watershed in Ventura, Paul Jenkin there was trying to start a movement to bring back the beaver. And I just wondered, do you have beaver over there in Tucson? And what do you think?
I think the beaver is a fantastic idea. So we used to, but we don't currently. And thankfully their numbers are slowly coming back in some area waterways, like the San Pedro River is getting more beaver back. And everywhere where I've observed them, they've had a very positive effect, not only for the health of the river itself, but the water table, the wildlife, all of it. And so working with the beaver, that's working with an animal that's its calling in life is to slow, spread, and sink that water. And so we can really learn from them. And yeah.
As far as I know, they're up in the Santa Ynez watershed, but I don't know Santa Barbara. Are there any beaver here?
There's
not.
Indian Creek, where the beaver are. They were planted there.
I want the t-shirt, bring back the beaver.
Oh, yeah.
You can do a lot with that. Yeah. All right. Well, I know it's a little bit later. We started a little later, and it was a longer talk than I've done in the past, but there was more info I wanted to impart than I've imparted in the past. So if there's any other questions or anything, you can come up to me personally, and I'll be back by the books in case anyone wants any books signed or anything as well. And thanks so much for coming, and please help spread the word.
Did you grow up in Tucson?
Yeah.
Born and everything?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's great. I was on the Mount Lemmon fire crew in '75.
Oh, yeah?
It was so cool. The fire about 5 years ago was pretty sad, though. That was really
Yeah. But stuff's coming back.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
All right, thanks. Okay.
Yeah. Hi.
Do you know who Gary Null is?
Gary Nabhan, you mean?
No, Gary Null.
Gary Null. No, I don't.
Okay, he's based in New York City right now, but he has a progressive radio network. You can hear him on KPFK at night on Tuesday.
Okay.
But from what I've heard from him, I think he'd be absolutely so excited about what you're doing, and he would publicize it.
Can you get me his contact info?
The Progressive Radio Network.
Okay, let me, I'll write it. Yeah, there we go.